What to do about Sue? A karmic journey from brainwashing to healing. This is a book I've read a few days ago. I finished reading a few days ago. It was given to me by a dear elder and sister, as I like to call her. Sukhavaha, that's it. Or Susan Bauer, that's her secular name. And that's how the title of the book runs by. What to do about Sue? So I've been having the fortune of contacting with Sukhavaha. She's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada in our Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage. She came to my Free Radical podcast the beginning of this year, I think. And she's a very unique person, healer, a wounded healer, as I like to call. And this book is, she gave me this book when I visited her a few weeks ago or a month ago in New Vrindaban in West Virginia. So first of all, I sent her a message today when I'm recording this, thanking her for giving me the book, thanking her for writing the book, and thanking her for going through the journey that she describes in this book and becoming the wounded healer that she is now, having redeemed, integrated, healed so many layers of her being, going through trauma, going through so much complexity. So this book is some type of memoir, if you will, though it's concentrated on one particular period of Sukhavaha's life, where she was deprogrammed. She was kidnapped by her parents while she was living in New Vrindaban as a Gaudiya Vaishnava, and she went through a very intense, traumatic, complex deprogramming experience, which took her years, if not decades, to acknowledge, to heal the trauma ingrained in the body, in the mind, in the emotions, how that affected her relationship with herself, with her former husband, with her children, with her parents, with Krishna, with life itself. And I personally heard a few times already how this deprogramming was going on, especially during the 60s and the 70s, more particularly, I would say. And I've met some practitioners from my tradition who went through that. And of course, until and unless you go through that yourself, you can only have a general idea of what that means. And of course, I'm sure different cases are different strokes for different folks, so to say. But in the particular case of Sukhavaha, that was really intense. That was really traumatizing. That was really abusive and cultish, interestingly, paradoxically, because supposedly these people are anti-cult, anti-brainwashing, but actually they are doing that exact same thing. So the whole book is a little bit of a memoir. Of course, she's narrating her life before this deprogramming experience, before joining Krishna consciousness, Bhakti Yoga, Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and after, of course, her reflections after. But the main thing concentrates on that, on her experience of being betrayed, as she will mention, by her parents who kidnapped her and basically tried to take her out. Of course, out of a genuine loving concern, we could say, in the midst of fear, in the midst of concerned parents. I can recall my own experience, though I've never been kidnapped or taken to a deprogrammer. I recall when I joined the ashram first time, I was 19, young, teenager, and I was living with my mom. My parents were divorced, and my mom was going to a church where they were telling her that I joined a satanic cult, basically. And my mom, of course, I'm only child, 19, confused, existential crisis. She's confused. She's in anxiety. So she believes them. So they start to come to my house when I was not there, interestingly. When I went to the ashram, they will come and do like an research in my room to find some satanic items. Whenever they will find some picture or statue, they will like tore that apart or threw it, and I will return the next day asking my mom, where's that picture? Where's that little whatever statue or deity of Krishna? Oh, it fell, it broken, it whatever. Every day something disappeared. Of course, at one point I asked her, this is too much, what's going on? And she confessed. And fortunately enough, I was able to speak to her with reason, with logic, say, Mom, do you see me satanized? or do you see me even better than ever? And she said, no, I see you better than ever. So please, Falena Farishate, let's judge the tree by its fruit. And I invited her to come with me to the ashram and investigate and speak with the devotees. I wouldn't intervene. She did so, fortunately, and happy ending to the story. So again, that's my experience, which is very different from being kidnapped by your parents and being deprogrammed, even in a few days. And that's a very important point that came to me. Even if you go through a few days of the natural, quote unquote, the normal standard deprogramming sequence, I'm trying to look here for it because she mentioned that very clearly. That really, even if it lasts for a few days, that's here it is. That can affect you for a lifetime or more. No? So first you have isolation, separation, kidnap, put it into a room. This is what Sukhavaha went through. Without able to leave the room, basically kidnapped, without able to talk to anyone, separated from her husband, only with the two deprogrammers for days in a cottage, isolated, no chance of chanting her japa or reading her books, attack on an identity, a constant attack on her guru, Srila Prabhupada, the books, the tradition, her own sense of identity as a Vaishnava, being shamed. She will mention self-betrayal, breaking point. She had a breaking point, of course, a breakdown, not necessarily a breakthrough at that time yet. How the deprogrammers present themselves as a salvation. I'm saving you, I'm protecting you from this, and eventually rebuilding a new self, getting back to normal life, to real society, and so on. Which, of course, when we are saying all this, there are cults, there are cultish groups. And as I like to say, there are even groups like ours, which are not a cult, but which can become cultish, can be lived in a cultish way, can be misrepresented in a cultish way. And that has happened many times, may continue to happen in some places, in some cases. So potentially the cultish pattern is there everywhere, though the tradition may be bona fide, ancient, deep, profound, healing, whole, deep. So, of course, there are many interesting things in this book. She's narrating her whole journey with her husband in New Vrindaban community. Of course, I will have liked to hear more about the experiences that she went through in New Vrindaban, because in itself, New Vrindaban is a very interesting community that I had the chance of visiting recently, which went through different interesting dynamics, especially in the 80s, with interfaith dialogue, being excommunicated from the larger institution to which they belonged, and so on. But of course, I can understand this was not the book for that. The focus was her deprogramming experience. And especially, I will say my favorite part, of course, of the book is the last part. The book is divided in 3 parts. So the part 3 is reconciliation. After betrayal, part 2, and after raising doubts, part 1. Reconciliation, and how after decades, when Sukhavaha was in probably her 50s or so, she starts to heal. She at one point, interestingly enough, she was married to her first husband. She was kind of pressured into accepting sannyas. At that time, to be a sannyas was a thing, it seems, so to say. Here's sannyas speaking about it. So as a lady, she embraced sannyas. That was kind of the innovation from the community, since generally sannyas is given to men. So she became a sannyas. I think the name she received was Eternal Love Swami. They received names in English. But after a few years, she realized, and she was married and she had kids. So that was not the healthiest step. But at that time, that was the best she could do, so to say. And she eventually realized how that was not healthy. And there was repression. And eventually her former husband got another family. She eventually got married again with someone 20 years younger than her, which helped her a lot. But still, she reflects in time, she was becoming codependent with that person, and still repressing and hiding and not confronting so many unhealed patterns, unredeemed parts, broken bits. So I really appreciate Sukhavaha's, and knowing her in person, it makes all the more sense. Her vulnerability, her honesty, her courage in gradually confronting and realizing, wow, I'm still so traumatized from that thing that happened decades ago for a few days in that cottage. I'm still carrying the wounds and the baggage from all that. So then comes a very intensive period of healing and studying and taking different courses for and workshops to gain more awareness and become more equipped in her emotional, psychological, internal toolkit to deal with this. All of that happened maybe 20, 25 years ago and continued to happen. Now I will say continues to happen from what I could witness from Sukhavaha. Very beautiful being. And yeah, then she goes to the details. And the interesting dynamic about this book is that she's narrating, she's positive. First of all, one thing that I don't want to forget, oh my gosh, how she can remember all these small details about so many specific situations. I'm here publicly confessing I'm envious of you, Sukaba. I have envy, hopefully holy envy. But I don't have that memory. How can you recall all these specific details and dates and timings and things that were said and then happened? Even if some of those were made up for the sake of the story, I'm sure many of them are actually true. So my pranam to your memory. So the story is narrated with her sitting in a circle with her children and with her parents. So there are different narrations. It's not only her side of the story, also her mom, who kept the diary from those times, will interject and share her ideas and part from her diary. Her father will talk. Sukhabaha's children will be asking questions in between. So it's a very engaging, dynamic format and presentation. So I was saying that the part that I most appreciated was the last one, reconciliation, which shows how after betrayal, after trauma, after abuse, there's always hope of redeeming relationships. She was not talking to her parents even for, I think, 7 years. She was even traumatized about the idea of visiting them, being visited by them, and being alone with themselves, because of the fear of being kidnapped again. So again, try to see all this beyond the particular case. I know probably most of you have not been kidnapped or deprogrammed, but you can apply the template to whatever trauma we have gone through, to whatever still triggers us, to whatever still we need to heal, we need to forgive, and how there is hope. Although I know every case and every journey is unique and different. But for me, this is a very hope-giving story and narrates how Sukhabaha eventually was able to heal her relationship with her mom, with her dad, with herself to begin with. That's the most important point here, that until and unless she was able to accept herself, basically, to love herself, to forgive herself, to understand herself in the context of Krishna consciousness, in the context of God being the center. That there's no doubt about that in the whole book. Sukhabaha is a very, simple and loving devotee of God. So that center is there. But how from that center can healing can happen to us first, and then we can extend that to other person. Unless I forgive myself, I can forgive you. Unless I learn to accept and love myself, probably I will extend my unresolved bits into every relationship I am. So she has done her homework, I can tell. By reading this book, you can see a testimony of life, as it says, a karmic journey from brainwashing to healing. Yeah, there was brainwashing, there was kidnapping, there was abuse, there was trauma, there was so much complexity, so much messiness, so much brokenness, so much fear, unresolved stuff. I think we can all identify with that. But the story doesn't end there. So that's the important thing. There is healing, there's redemption, there is courageousness, there is hope. And there's empowerment that comes as a result of that. When you go through all those complexities, through all those layers, and I can relate to that in my own journey as much as I've traveled my journey and as much as I've done my homework, I can relate how those things work in that way. When you are able to acknowledge your broken bits, when you're able to address yourself with self-compassion and understanding and extend that to others, and you're walking your talk as much as you can, that brings so much empowerment. And you can heal others, touch others, not you, only you in a narcissistic, isolated, egotistical way, but you as a result of what you've gone through. So for me, this is a very beautiful book, very hero's journey-like pattern, heroine's journey in this case, of being in a comfort zone and to begin with, so to say, familiar, everything is fine. Eventually, traveling outside of that, investigating, exploring, experiencing, going through complexity, pain, bewilderment, trauma, and then doing the necessary work and returning home as a transformed being. Same landscape, different set of eyes. So do yourself a favor, try to get a copy of What to Do About Sue by Sukhavaha or Susan Bauer, very dear friend, sister, elder, hopefully not only of mine, but I'm sure of all of you after you read this book. See you in our next section of Swami Reacts, and may you have a blessed day.